We don't need people stuck in the past holding us back, she said, flipping her tablet shut like the conversation was already over. My name is Martin Blake. I'm 60 years old, and until that morning, I was the senior operations director at Corbin Dynamics, a mid-sized industrial systems company in Columbus, Ohio. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, just nodded once, stood up from the edge of the desk where I'd been sitting, and walked out of Erica Corbin's office. No drama, no second chances. After 22 years with the company, that was it. Outside her glass door, a few of the younger staff avoided eye contact as I passed. Some had once sat across from me during their interviews, nervous college grads hoping to land their first real job. I'd trained most of them, mentored some, fought to keep a few from being laid off during tough quarters. Now they just looked at their screens. In my office, I moved slowly, not because I was stunned, though I was, but because there's something ceremonial about packing up your life. The photo of my late wife, a paperweight shaped like a turbine rotor, gift from the team 5 years back. The safety medal from our zero incident year, all of it went into a single cardboard box. I drove home in silence, the box beside me on the passenger seat. Through the windshield, I saw the plant, its boilers, control systems, and machine floors, all of which I had helped modernize. I'd spent over 2 decades making that place run cleaner, faster, safer. And now I was excess baggage. But what Erica didn't realize, what she hadn't bothered to read in her rush to modernize the leadership structure, was that my original employment agreement, signed by her father himself, included a severance clause. It guaranteed 24 months of salary if I was terminated without cause. It was buried in the appendix, drafted during a time when her father, George Corbin, believed in loyalty and continuity. I didn't slam the truck door. I didn't call to yell. I called Janice Monroe, my attorney and longtime friend, who answered on the second ring. They fired you? Effective immediately, I said. Did they give you cause? Nope. Just a vague line about strategic realignment. Janice was quiet for a beat. Then Martin, I hope she read the fine print. I'm guessing she didn't. The next morning we met at her office. I brought the original contract, still in my filing cabinet after all these years. She flipped to the clause, highlighted it with a bright yellow marker, and looked up at me. She's going to regret this. I looked out the window at the empty sidewalk, not smiling, not angry either. It's not about revenge, I said. No, Janice replied. It's about what's right. Janice read the paragraph a second time, her eyes narrowing the way they always did when she was mentally preparing a case. Section 9, subparagraph C, she said aloud. Termination without documented cause shall entitle the employee to a severance package equal to 24 months of current salary, including health and retirement contributions. She tapped her pen on the page. This clause is airtight. They'll either settle fast or look real foolish in front of a judge. I didn't smile, not yet. It wasn't about the money, not entirely. George insisted on that clause, I said quietly, watching her underline it. Said it was to protect people who built things, not just those who rearranged them. Janice looked up. He was one of the good ones. He was. George Corbin had started Corbin Dynamics in a single-bay garage on the south side of Columbus. I met him 26 years ago when I was between jobs, fresh off a shutdown at a manufacturing plant in Dayton. I had a mechanical engineering degree, a resume full of field work, and not much else. He didn't care about titles. What he cared about was whether you could solve problems on the floor. I was 40 then, already gray at the temples and starting to think my best years were behind me. George didn't see that. You know machines, he had said in our first interview. You know people. The rest we can teach. He put me on as a field engineer. 2 years later, he promoted me to operations director. I never once asked for a raise. He gave them when he thought they were deserved. When my wife Lisa got sick, George was the one who quietly shifted my schedule so I could make every chemo appointment without burning vacation time. He never said a word about it, just handled it. But George had retired 4 years ago. Heart problems. He'd handed things off to Erica, fresh out of Wharton and full of big ideas, some good, some less so. The first red flag came during her 3rd week when she suggested outsourcing our assembly division to a firm in Mexico. I told her we'd lose the tight tolerances that made our products valuable in the first place. She called me resistant to change. The second was when she brought in a consultant who'd never stepped foot in a plant, but had a dozen PowerPoint slides about vertical integration strategies. George would have rolled his eyes. Now Erica sat in George's old office, surrounded by smart lights, glass walls, and a team that looked like they were interviewing for tech startups, not running a machinery firm. And she'd pulled the trigger without reading the document her own father had signed. I'll draft the demand letter this afternoon, Janice said, closing the folder. But I want to ask, are you just looking for the payout, or is there more you're planning? I looked at her, really looked. I haven't decided yet, I said, but deep down I already knew. This wasn't over. 3 days later, I sat across from Erica Corbin and her attorney in a sleek downtown conference room. The glass walls overlooked High Street, but inside the mood was opaque and heavy. Janice Monroe sat to my left, calm and surgical. She had my original contract laid neatly in front of her, the severance clause tabbed and highlighted like an exhibit at trial. "This is ridiculous," Erica said, not even glancing at me. She wore a charcoal blazer over a silk blouse, tapping her fingernails against the table with irritation. "We're repositioning the company. That's cause enough." Janice didn't flinch. Your father's language was very clear. Termination without cause, as defined by documented performance issues or ethical violations, triggers the full severance. This wasn't disciplinary. You never even issued a warning. Erica's lawyer, a young guy named Seth, flipped through a thin folder with a nervous expression. His posture screamed in over his head. "We're prepared to offer 6 months," Erica cut in, trying to sound firm. "That's generous." Janice leaned forward. "You owe Martin 24. That's what the contract says. We have no interest in negotiating away what's already guaranteed." Erica scoffed. He was insubordinate, resistant to innovation, always pushing back on new strategies. Janice raised an eyebrow. "Any documentation of that? Memos? Performance improvement plans? Anything on file?" Seth cleared his throat, clearly wishing he were somewhere else. "We, don't have formal documentation at this time." Janice nodded slowly and closed the contract. "Then we'll proceed to court. Discovery will be illuminating, especially given the pattern of terminations your client initiated, all targeting employees over the age of 50. That landed like a hammer. Erica leaned back, arms crossed, her jaw clenched. "You're playing dirty." "No," I said, speaking for the first time. "I'm holding you accountable." She looked at me then, really looked. For a moment, I saw her father in the set of her eyes. But where George's stubbornness had come from conviction, Erica's came from pride. "You'll never work in this industry again," she snapped. "Everyone will know you're difficult." I didn't blink. "Then they'll also know I'm not afraid to stand up for myself." Just then, the conference room door opened. George Corbin walked in, thinner than I remembered, using a cane now. He nodded to Janice, then to me, and turned toward his daughter. "Erica," he said softly, "we need to talk, now." She stiffened. "Dad, this isn't—" "Not now," he said, with that same quiet authority that used to silence factory floors. They stepped outside. Through the glass, I saw them arguing, George gesturing, Erica growing red in the face. When they returned, George addressed Seth. "Draw up the full severance package, as stated in the contract." Erica opened her mouth, but George didn't give her the chance. "I gave you this company," he said, "not the right to dishonor it." Janice stood, gathering her folder. "We'll expect payment within 5 business days." As we walked out, Erica said nothing, but I didn't need her words. I had what I came for, and I had just begun. The severance hit my account on a Thursday, $284,000 after taxes. I should have felt victorious, maybe even vindicated. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the number, wondering if all I'd earned after 22 years was a check in silence. But that same afternoon, I made 3 phone calls. First was to Thomas Ewan, our former head of design and process engineering. He'd been pushed out 2 weeks before me, quietly with no fanfare. I'd trained Thomas myself when he was fresh out of college. Watched him become the best process thinker in the building. "You still interested in building something that matters?" I asked. There was a pause, then, "You serious?" "Completely." Second was to Nora Lee, who ran our fabrication scheduling like it was an air traffic control tower. She didn't get fired yet, but I knew she was on borrowed time. Erica had slashed her department's overtime and consolidated roles under someone who barely knew the difference between plasma cutting and water jet. Third was to Doug Ramsey, owner of Forge Point Components, a precision metalwork company in Grove City. Doug had approached me 3 times in the last decade, offering to partner on a joint venture focused on specialty systems, low volume, high complexity jobs that Corbin Dynamics used to be proud of. I'd always said no. This time I said yes. The next morning I drove to Forge Point's modest facility on the south edge of town. Doug met me in the parking lot, a big man in a worn flannel shirt with hands that looked like they still worked machines. "I heard about what happened," he said as we shook hands. "I'm not interested in revenge," I said. "I'm interested in building something better." Doug grinned. "That's why I've always liked you. We sat in his office with coffee and a whiteboard. I told him my idea, a new venture focused entirely on custom industrial assemblies, the kind that big manufacturers were walking away from because they weren't scalable enough. Precision work, I said. Zero shortcuts, built by people who know what the hell they're doing. Doug scratched his beard. You'd run it? I'd build it, with the right team. We talked numbers. He had capital and facility space. I had contacts, designs, and a reputation that still carried weight in the right corners. By Monday, we had a name, Ironclad Systems. I sent the first round of messages to former colleagues. Quiet inquiries, no pressure, just one question. You still want to do work you're proud of? And they came, some cautiously, some eagerly, all of them tired of being told experience didn't matter anymore. I wasn't trying to resurrect the past. I was trying to build forward with integrity, using the best of what we knew and adapting it to a world that had forgotten the value of doing things right. And this time we'd do it on our terms. 2 weeks into launching Ironclad Systems, I received a message from Nora Lee. It was short, just a screenshot and a single line. You need to see this. The screenshot showed an internal memo from Corbin Dynamics, one Erica probably didn't expect to leak. It detailed the immediate liquidation of high-precision CNC lathes and fabrication tools George Corbin had invested in just 2 years before. Machines meant for custom jobs. Machines I had personally spec'd and helped bring in under budget. Under the memo header, repurposing non-core assets to free up cash flow for growth-oriented initiatives. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and called Thomas Ewan. She's selling off the best gear we had, I said. She already dumped half the test bench equipment, Thomas replied. Told the team we were moving away from custom specs. Too much labor overhead. I exhaled slowly. How much did she get for it? Auction prices. Maybe 30 cents on the dollar, if that. I leaned back in my chair, the hum of Ironclad's temporary shop behind me. We were working with what we had, modest equipment, tight scheduling, but we still had standards. Erica was stripping Corbin's future for cash. And guess what else? Thomas added. A buddy of mine in procurement says Erica's been spending a lot of time in Miami. Word is she's buying condos under a shell corp. I didn't say anything, just stared at the wall for a few seconds. This wasn't just short-sighted leadership. This was a controlled demolition, disguised as innovation. She was cashing out on her father's legacy, one department at a time. That night, I met Doug Ramsey at a local diner. I showed him the memo. His face turned grim. We always suspected she was hollowing them out, he said, pushing his coffee aside. But this confirms it. I'm not here to celebrate it, I said. There are still good people at Corbin, people with families, mortgages, retirement plans tied to that company. Doug nodded. So what do you want to do? I paused, then. I want to position Ironclad to catch the fallout, bring in the talent, catch the clients before they walk. Maybe even the suppliers. Doug leaned in, interested. You think Corbin's big enough to collapse? Not yet, but it's bleeding in all the places that count. As I left the diner, I sent one more message, this time to Jennifer Moss, former QA lead at Corbin. She hadn't been fired yet, but she was hanging on by a thread. If you see anything you think I should know, I wrote, send it my way, quietly. She replied within minutes, already started a folder. Erica thought she could gut the company unnoticed. She was wrong. And the people who built it? We were paying attention. The call came just after 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was in the shop reviewing tooling quotes with Thomas when my phone buzzed. George Corbin. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Martin, he said, his voice lower than I remembered. Do you have a minute? I do. There was a pause, then, I know what you're doing. I didn't respond. I hadn't broken any laws, hadn't made any public accusations. But word travels fast in our industry, and George had always known how to read between the lines. I'm not calling to ask you to stop, he said. I'm calling to ask for your help. That caught me off guard. What kind of help? The kind that might save what's left of my company. He sounded tired, no longer the commanding founder who used to walk factory floors with his sleeves rolled up. This voice belonged to a man watching his life's work unravel, thread by thread. Erica's been liquidating equipment, he continued. I found out last week. She didn't tell the board. She didn't tell me. She's cutting corners on quality, laying off veterans, and blaming market trends. I know, I said. We've seen the effects already. A few of your former clients reached out to us. Another long pause. The board's concerned, quietly. They don't want a scandal, but they also don't want a collapse. So what are you asking, George? Come to my house Thursday night. Bring Thomas if he's willing. I've arranged for a few board members to join us. We want to discuss options. Options? Leadership options, he said, including the possibility of merging with your new outfit. Ironclad. I stood there, surrounded by the hum of machines and the faint clang of steel from the floor below. We had 8 people now. 2 former Corbin techs had just joined that week. Jennifer was still feeding us updates from inside. I'm not promising anything, I said slowly. Fair enough, George replied. I just need you to listen. I hung up and looked at Thomas, who'd been pretending not to eavesdrop while flipping through tooling specs. You were right, I told him. He does know. About Erica. About everything. Thomas nodded once. So what now? I looked down at the table between us. Scattered parts, blueprints, and a scratched-up laptop running scheduling software we barely kept up with. Now, I said, we hear him out. Because for all the betrayal, for all the corporate arrogance, this wasn't just about competing with Corbin anymore. This was about preserving what mattered. The people, the principles, the work that stood for something. And if the company we helped build could still be saved, we'd at least try. The board meeting was held in Corbin Dynamics' main conference room. Same place I'd sat 100 times before, though never like this. Erica stood at the head of the table, flipping through her quarterly presentation. She spoke quickly, her tone defensive, blaming supply chain delays, shifting market demands, and legacy inefficiencies for the company's 37% revenue drop. I stood at the back of the room, flanked by Thomas and George. We'd agreed I wouldn't speak until she finished. Let her hang herself with her own narrative. Erica didn't notice me at first, too focused on spinning bad numbers into buzzwords. But halfway through the slide titled Strategic Streamlining, Phase 3, her eyes landed on me. Her face froze. What is he doing here? Before anyone could answer, George stood. Erica, he said calmly, the board has reached a decision regarding leadership transition. Martin is here to present that arrangement. Erica's voice rose. You can't be serious. He's been undermining us from the outside. No, said the chairman. He's been watching what we failed to. I stepped forward, placing a folder on the table. Same style as the one that had held my severance agreement. This one held something very different. As of this morning, I said, the board has approved a merger between Corbin Dynamics Custom Systems Division and Ironclad Systems. Erica's laugh was sharp and disbelieving. You can't do that. I'm the majority shareholder. George shook his head. No, Erica, you hold 20%. I retain 51% in a private trust. And I voted in favor of the merger. She looked stunned. Her fingers curled around the edge of the table. This is a setup. This is business, I replied, voice steady. Nothing personal. Don't you dare use that line on me, she snapped. Thomas stepped into the room. The rest of Corbin Dynamics will remain operational under new leadership. Mine. The custom work will be handled jointly with Ironclad. Erica's hands trembled as she flipped through the documents in front of her. You can't just erase me. No one's erasing you, George said gently. But you don't get to destroy what others spent decades building. She said nothing, just stood there motionless as the board members quietly nodded. I gathered the folder and stepped back. The room suddenly hushed. 6 months ago, they'd escorted me out with a cardboard box. Today, I was back, not as an employee, but as a partner in shaping what came next. As I left the room, I heard Erica whisper, "This isn't over." She was wrong. For us, it was just beginning. 1 year after the merger, I stood on the second floor overlook of the newly integrated production wing, Ironclad Systems at Corbin Works. The hum of machinery was steady, familiar, and efficient. Workers moved with purpose, engineers cross-referenced tablets and schematics, and the smell of warm metal in the air reminded me we had built something real again. Not a comeback, a correction. George stood beside me, leaning slightly on his cane. His eyes scanned the floor below with quiet pride. Quarterlies came in this morning, he said, handing me a printout. Highest margins we posted in 5 years, and not one missed delivery in the last 2 quarters. I skimmed the numbers and nodded. But what mattered more were the faces on that floor. Old veterans, young hires, working side by side. Not segregated by department or tenure, but learning from one another. Mutual respect had become culture, not policy. George glanced sideways. Erica called yesterday from Miami. I raised an eyebrow. She's launching a consulting firm, he added. Asked if I'd invest. Will you? He chuckled. Told her to come back to Columbus first. Learn the business from the ground up. The way I did, the way you did. And she hung up. He smiled. But she called back this morning, asked if the offer still stood. We stood there a moment in silence, watching a young apprentice get tips from Jennifer Moss, now heading up quality assurance full-time. She's got the lab running like clockwork again, I said. George nodded. So does Thomas in engineering. That man never stops sketching improvements. Old school genius. I looked out over the factory floor one more time and let myself take it in. This wasn't just a victory. It was a reminder that sometimes the only way forward is through resistance. That experience, when combined with humility and innovation, doesn't age out. It evolves. I used to think the severance clause George put in my contract was about money. Now I realized it was about honor. About making sure those who held the line for decades had something to stand on if pushed aside too soon. Some lessons aren't taught in MBA programs. They're learned in heat, sweat, failure, and staying late when no one else will. As I walked back down to the floor, I passed a young engineer training 2 interns. He looked up, saw me watching, and nodded. Not with fear, not with formality, but with recognition. We had earned our place and kept the door open for the next generation.